What's up, people? My name is Connor, and this is the Connor Green Podcast. We are back in action. I haven't done a solo podcast in a while, so I'm really pumped for this one. What we're going to cover today is how to do your first pull-up. So I wrote a pretty darn thorough treatment on this. It's on the website at sparkfitness.com. If you didn't know, I own an in-person training gym called Spark Fitness. We also train people online. So if you're interested, you can reach out and we can help you. We primarily focus on getting people really strong and helping them lose body fat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this article. Obviously, it's a podcast, so you may not be watching this, but more likely listening. You might see me look away because I'm going to reference the article. Now, I'm not just going to read this word for word. I will read through it and summarize the pieces, add some of my own spontaneous commentary. So what you can take from that is you should not only listen to the podcast, but if you want best results, to make sure to reference that article. My goal was to create maybe the most thorough treatment of the subject on the entire internet. I think I may have done that. So far, we're at 6,000 words, but it's not fluff. Okay, I've put a lot of time into this, and I want to dispel some myths, clarify things, talk about some of the theory, and ultimately give the best advice for people that are trying to get their first pull-up. And there's a variety of topics that I cover in that article. The first is the fundamental problem. We're going to cover some factors involved in getting your first pull-up, strength versus skill. We'll talk about the kipping pull-up, a subject I know people want to hear about. Talk about strength to body weight ratio. We're going to talk about training and then specific considerations for women, since that is of particular importance. The fundamental limiter in the equation of whether you can do a pull-up or not is how strong you are. It's strength. If you are not strong enough, you can't do one, period. But if you are strong enough, you can do one regardless of any other variable. Now, of course, there are other variables at play because no one can just develop unlimited strength. So under that constraint, it is really, truly an issue of strength to body weight ratio. The stronger you are, the more you could weigh and still do a pull-up. But this is a double-edged sword. On the other hand, the more you weigh, the stronger you have to be in order to do a pull-up, which is not always a favorable progression, right? You can't just, if you weigh 1,000 pounds and you deadlift 1,000 pounds, you're probably not going to be able to do a pull-up still. A really good proxy for strength in this case, as I already mentioned, is the deadlift. It will give you a really good indication as to how strong your pulling muscles are. They require significant hand, forearm, lat, and back muscle strength to complete. And if you perform the deadlift correctly, the exact same muscles you need to be very strong in order to perform a pull-up are being developed extremely well. As I'll expand on, being a great deadlifter not only extends to being good at pull-ups, but it also extends to all other areas of strength and athleticism. Whereas if someone is just good at pull-ups, that probably means they're just good at pull-ups. So a quick preface to this: pull-ups for women. 7% of this guide will apply to everyone regardless of gender. But here's where it differs fundamentally. If you are a biological female, doing a pull-up is going to be very hard. Unless you're athletically gifted, in which case you probably don't need this guide. It will take significant emphasis on significant dedication. We're talking about working through frustrations and fighting the desire to quit or questioning if you should change goals. As a side note, a University of Dayton study recruited 17 female students that couldn't do a pull-up but were still considered fit. They put them through the ringer for 3 months with the sole goal of getting a pull-up. And at the end, only 4 of the 17 could do one. And to be honest, I'm surprised it was that high. The main conclusion: even young college days women with a fitness baseline above average still struggled. Now, in this article, I list the link there. I actually had to request the full text directly from the authors. If you want it, I can send it to you. The disclaimer here: I hate almost all exercise phys literature. That's a podcast for another time. But I can give credit where credit is due. This study does a good job of illustrating exactly what I'm saying. It will take dedication not only to the appropriate training consistently, but also to high quality sleep consistently, eating a diet that supports building muscle, managing your stress, and long-term thinking. Here's the good, wonderful thing about having the goal of getting a pull-up though. Once you get one, doing 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 is very, very close by. It is totally common for someone to get their first pull-up in 1 week, to do 2 the next week, and 3 the following. Once you get over that initial hump, it becomes significantly easier to start knocking them out and enjoying the fruits of all your labor. Additionally, once you have the ability to do one, even if you don't train them at all anymore, or you fall off of your training, or you have an injury or a setback, if you try to get them again, it will be significantly easier than what you had to do to get them the first time. This is why we tell people to not be scared of coming back to the gym after a layoff. Once you have achieved something, you become strong, for example, even if you don't train anymore and you fall off the rest of your life, you will always be stronger than if you had not trained. If you try to get that level of strength again, you will achieve that same level of progress significantly faster than you did the first time. Pull-ups for women is an extremely worthy and noble goal and an incredible accomplishment. And nothing says a badass like a woman that can do strict pull-ups in the gym. But candidly, they're not the same level of accomplishment for men. And it's really not even that close. In our gym especially, it's very common to see women out squatting men. And by kind of a lot. I just taught a class the other day with 2 members that signed up at the same time. They've each been at the gym for 5 years and have both trained extremely hard. And the workout was squats and strict pull-ups. The man squatted 3 sets of 5 at 225, 5'10", 49, weighs about 180. You may be able to tell who this is. It doesn't really matter. I'm just illustrating a point, okay? He's improved significantly in his time at the gym. After doing the squatting and the workout, jumps up, busts out 8 to 9 strict pull-ups. The female in the class, 5'2", around the age of 35, weighs about 170, squatted 3 sets of 5 at 210. So only 15-pound difference in squat. That's amazing. That's incredible. But she can't do a pull-up. She did about 90% of a pull-up, so she almost did one. But despite having almost the same leg strength, which is incredible because the man in this case has the advantage in that regard, she still can't do a pull-up. And if the man was as strong as the woman in this case, he would be able to do pull-ups. Why is that? Well, there are several reasons that I will continue to expand on, but the biggest factor is that she's female. With exactly the same numbers of a man, she would be able to do pull-ups. Ladies, you cannot look to your male counterparts and be frustrated at their progress. They're playing an entirely different ballgame when it comes to pull-ups. This doesn't mean you can't do them. You can. It doesn't mean you can't beat your male counterparts. You can. The path is just going to be harder. I might expand on this in a separate article and a separate podcast, but the male advantages for pull-ups literally starts in utero at around week 6 of pregnancy. This is a significant built-in advantage. But with that said, if you have decided to embark on the journey of getting your first pull-up, I want you to get there no matter who you are. Keep reading. In this case, keep listening. Now, there's some factors you need to consider, okay? Most people just do not understand where they are and what they need to do in order to get a pull-up. You need to take into account a bunch of specific factors to understand your case so you know exactly what to do. Being younger is generally better. Body weight, being lighter is generally better. Body fat percentage, having a lower body fat percentage is generally better. Limb length, if you have shorter arms, it's going to be easier. Height, if you're shorter, it's going to be easier. And overall strength, being stronger is always better. Strength to body weight ratio, which we'll talk more about. Being relatively strong to your body weight is better. And sex and gender, being male makes achieving pull-ups easier. Question I get, will I ever be able to do one? I can pretty damn confidently say that the answer is yes. It might be out of some people's range, but with enough dedication, the great vast majority of people will be able to do at least one pull-up. But you need to be realistic about the amount of work it is going to take you, given the factors above. And you need to eat and train accordingly to your situation. This is especially important to the ladies out there. When a man comes to the gym and does a pull-up on day 1 and a woman's been training for 6 months and still can't do one, the ladies can't be discouraged by that because it's an entirely different ballgame. But that's normal. That's just how it is. I can't change that. But we can change your perspective, not only to look into the really long term to doing a pull-up as a significant accomplishment, but also to doing everything you need to do to be able to get one. That starts with being realistic about the amount of work it's going to take given the factors I just talked about. If you're 22, reasonably light, you already have a low body fat percentage, you're a little bit shorter, you have short limbs, you're very strong, and you're male, you probably can go to the gym the first day and do a pull-up. If you're 42, overweight, not very strong, tall, you got long arms, and a female, not talking about any people in particular, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be 10 or 15 or 50 times harder than the person I just talked about, but you can still get one. It's just going to take a level of dedication that's high. You can't do 5 to 10 minutes per week and achieve that goal. And we'll talk about the best way for women to accomplish this later. But first, I want to talk more about what I didn't list in factors, okay? You might notice, or you might not have noticed, that what is not listed in factors is skill. That is because strict pull-ups is not a skill. This is what holds people back drastically when it comes to this. The ability to do a strict pull-up is limited by strength, and it is not a skill you can practice. Strength you train, skills you practice. This is where many people go astray and they never get things right. You can't just practice strict pull-ups until you get them. I am going to talk about the differences between strength and skill. I'll return to this point, and then we'll address the elephant in the room for a lot of people, which is the kipping pull-up. A strength is limited by strength. Strength is the ability to produce force. Skill is a neurological adaptation you practice to get good at that thing. They are entirely different things. A skill is limited by your skills, otherwise stated as your brain's ability to tell you to do something. Skills are largely neurological. Of course, you can lack both strength and skill to do something. For most practical application, people lack strength more than they actually lack skill, but they try to get that strength by practicing a skill, and it's extremely inefficient. Strength generally takes longer to get than the next level of skill. A strength is something that you train, and you can't just do more of it and increase the rate of increasing your strength. The number of people that think, well, if I just strength train more, I will get better faster, is way too high. It doesn't work that way. There is a human physiological speed limit at which you can gain strength, and doing more strength training beyond that point results in overtraining, plateauing, injury, and getting weaker. You can't just strength train 7 days a week and then 10 times a week and then twice a day and then 20 sessions a week and become an Olympic level strength athlete. There's a speed limit that for beginners, it's 2 or 3 doses of strength training a week yields the best results because of that limit. People use steroids to raise the physiological speed limit at which you can gain strength and muscle. Skills, on the other hand, are something you practice, and you can just do more and get better faster. In fact, for most skills, there really isn't an upper limit to the amount of time you can spend doing something and doing it to get better. Take dancing, playing the piano, or double unders. You can practice them for hours and hours and hours per day, and you will get better at them faster and faster. If you practice the piano 10 hours per day, you'll get better faster than the person or the version of yourself that only practices 1 hour per day. As long as that person is not a phenom, obviously, which is extremely rare. You can't do that with strength training. You cannot say that the person that strength trains 3 days a week will get worse results than the person that strength trains 20 hours a week. In fact, the person that strength trains 20 hours a week, certainly if they're natural, is going to get worse results. That is the difference between a strength that is trained and a skill that is practiced. If you try to practice your strength, you will fail. And even if you do succeed, you wasted a tremendous amount of time doing that. Some people will inevitably say to me, well, I practiced pull-ups 3 times a week until I got them. But this is really a semantics issue, okay? You might think you are practicing, but really you're doing some kind of strength training. And through that, you got stronger until you were able to do a pull-up. A further way to make this point clear is this. If you can't deadlift 600, is that because you don't have the skill or because you're not strong enough? Do you just need to practice deadlifting 600 20 hours a week until you get it? No. That's impossible. You would never be able to deadlift 600 by practicing deadlifting 600. If you can do a deadlift with a PVC pipe correctly, you have reached the skill threshold for being able to deadlift 600. You just don't have the strength. And like almost everything in the gym, the strength is harder to get than the skill. The main takeaway from this paragraph, you don't lack skill, you lack strength, and more specifically, the strength to body weight ratio to do a pull-up. So we can take this and apply it to the kipping pull-up. If you're not familiar, a kipping pull-up is where you use your entire body to generate momentum to propel yourself above the bar. There's a skill component, there's a small strength component, but once you've mastered that, you can very quickly do a bunch of pull-ups. Because again, you're using your entire body weight to generate momentum. The kipping pull-up is a skill, however. It has a low strength prerequisite. This is very similar to billiards. You need some strength to be able to strike the ball hard and to hold the cue effectively. But once you have that prerequisite strength, it's about skill. For kipping pull-ups, this is because the force that carries you above the bar is generated by your legs and core, not the strength in your back and arms. Before I ever heard of a kipping pull-up, I could do 15 strict dead hang pull-ups. And it took me about 2 one-hour sessions of practice by myself. And notice how I said practice. By myself to learn how to do them. This was particularly easy because of the strength I had already pre-developed. From that point forward, for the next 4 years, I was hooked on kipping pull-ups. At one point, I was able to do more than 50 in a row, which I'm 6'3", and at the time had a body weight of 190 pounds. So it's not like I'm short and just have a baby range of motion. I got good at them. But during that time, I put on zero muscle on my hands, forearms, arms, and back. And why? Because I got really, really good at the skill of kipping pull-ups. And that was the limiter. Once I had the baseline strength for kipping pull-ups, the limiter was skill. The more I practiced, the more skill I required, the more kipping pull-ups I was able to do. As I went from 5 to 10 to 20 to 50 plus kipping pull-ups, I was not getting stronger. I was getting more skilled at generating force with my core and legs to propel my chin above the bar. Strength is the ability to produce force. I haven't done a podcast on this, but I need to. In the article, I include a link to talking about what strength actually is and how you develop it. Look in the article, you can read it. If you weigh 151 pounds, okay, you need to produce 152 pounds of force with your arms and back to do a pull-up. That's all there is to it. If you change that equation and you add 20, 30, 50, or 100 pounds of upward force generated by your legs, now you only need to produce 32 pounds of force with your arms. That doesn't make you stronger. It is a skill component overcoming the lack of ability that you have to generate the appropriate force with your arms and back muscles. You are using a skill to make up the gap. After coaching thousands of people in the kipping and strict pull-up, here are some typical kipping stories. Person's been a member for 7 years, can do 20 kipping pull-ups and 0 strict. This person doesn't have the physique of someone that can do 20, really, because they can't do any. And they always are trying to figure out how to get more muscle, more toned arms and back, despite doing all kinds of kipping pull-ups every week. The next type of person practices kipping pull-ups 3 times a week for 2 or 3 years, and eventually can do 3 or 4 kipping pull-ups and no strict pull-ups. This person is a screaming example of an incredible work ethic at incredible inefficiency. Next person focuses on strict, eventually learns that they can gain the strength to do 3 to 5, and then learns how to do kipping pull-ups in 1 week, and then easily accumulates 15 to 20, because once they have the strength, the prerequisite strength, they can then practice the skill a lot and rapidly acquire the skill to do lots of kipping pull-ups. But in the meantime, they've developed the physique gains of the strength required to do pull-ups that they can also apply elsewhere. The next type of person comes into the gym, can do 10 strict pull-ups already, and I can teach them how to do a kipping pull-up in like 10 minutes. Then, an all too common story is a person is frustrated that they're stuck on developing a strict pull-up. So they start learning how to kip and they skip to the finish line of I can do pull-ups. And despite this, they don't get the strength or muscle advantages of being able to do strict pull-ups. And this person usually isn't interested in getting much stronger or losing weight, but they're still frustrated that they're stuck. Shocker. Now, I want to note very clearly, I've taught hundreds of people how to do them. I've done tens of thousands myself, and I've never actually seen someone get hurt doing them, despite what the critics of CrossFit might say. I personally think you're at higher risk of injury without the relevant strength first, but I haven't personally observed that. And I have to be honest about that. But the reality is clear. Kipping pull-ups do not build strength and therefore do not build muscle. If they do happen to make someone stronger, it is because they are weak enough and they don't have the prerequisite strength of doing one. But that doesn't mean that that's what you should do to gain strength. It's ineffective and you'll plateau almost immediately. This also illustrates something called the novice effect, which I have a different article on and I'll do a podcast on. The novice effect basically says that everything works when you're a beginner. If you're off the couch, riding your bike will make your bench press grow up, but that stops very soon. The more untrained you are, the more every freaking thing works. Everything freaking works, which is why we can't really learn anything from a lot of the exercise phys studies because they're always on beginners. So everything always works to a certain degree. If you don't have the strength, quote unquote, if you're relatively weak, doing anything is going to make you a little bit stronger. But spending hours and hours and hours practicing a kipping pull-up to gain a small amount of strength is a very inefficient way to do that. And just because someone did doesn't mean you should. Take this, for example. You do not physically have the strength to skate, but someone says, well, I got stronger from skating anyway. I mean, I just went and did it. I was falling over and over again. I was rehabbing from an accident. But eventually I could skate. Therefore, skating is strength training and it builds muscle. It doesn't. That person would have been much better off doing a strength training program and then skating, and skating would have been much easier because they could have been working on the skill instead of doing something wildly inefficient to develop the strength for skating. If you got stronger from skating, it was ineffective. The strength gains will stop almost immediately because the novice effect wears out very quickly. And if you could say, hey, meet the minimum strength to skate before skating, then it would have never been strength training for you in the first place. Apply that to kipping pull-ups. If I don't have the hand strength to play the piano, but decided to start practicing the piano anyway, and I observed through doing that my hands got stronger, that's only because I had extreme weakness to start off with. That doesn't mean that playing the piano to get stronger is a good idea. Apply this to double unders, shooting a basketball, anything handstand related, or any other skill you can possibly think of. If you can't do a kipping pull-up, the fastest way to get good at them is to get stronger. Notice I said good at them, not yank out 2 to 3 after X number of, tens of hundreds of thousands of hours of practice. I mean, becoming efficient at them. It is not to practice kipping pull-ups all the time. As you get stronger, you'll accumulate muscle, tone, and the ability to easily learn how to do kipping pull-ups. Or you can bias kipping pull-ups and attain a marginal level of strength improvement due to the novice effect, get some kipping pull-ups, lots of soreness, and minimal muscle gain, and still not have strict pull-ups. But Connor, what about the soreness I feel in my arms and back after doing a bunch of kipping pull-ups? Well, it's funny you should ask. I'm actually currently writing what I think will be the seminal article on why soreness doesn't correlate to results. I may make that a book someday. In the case of the kipping pull-ups, soreness is generated not through a strength gaining process, but by a large amount of force that was generated from the legs above one's own body weight being lowered and slowed with significant force beyond what that person has the strength to produce on their own, which is why the momentum must be generated by the legs in the first place. That force is generated not by the tissues that have to slow the body, but by the legs and core, which are much stronger than what the arms and back can lower without significant muscle damage, which leads to the soreness. So that leads to a significant strain on recovery resources for almost no progress. If you need further proof, think about how strict pull-ups, whatever variation you can do, ring rows, banded pull-ups, or someone that can do strict pull-ups, they hardly generate any soreness at all, but they generate significant strength and muscle gains. That's because the same tissues responsible for lowering yourself are only tasked with lowering the amount of force that they are capable of generating, instead of getting a significant bump in force from the legs. And now the musculature that is responsible for slowing down your descent so you don't fall off the bar is much greater than what those tissues were capable of generating. That's where that significant soreness comes from. It's not good. It's not a benefit to you. Anyone that could do strict pull-ups will tell you, and I'm one. At the time of this writing, at the time of this recording, I'm about 263 pounds, and I recently managed to do 10 strict pull-ups with zero soreness. Zero. I include a video in the article. It's on YouTube if you want to see it. I say this not because 10 strict pull-ups is particularly impressive, but at a particularly high body weight, because I'm strong enough, I'm still able to do strict pull-ups. And as a side note, I'm about to tick down to 242 for an upcoming powerlifting meet. And in that process of ticking down body weight, I'm going to be 15 or 16 at that time. 1, because I'm strong, but 2, because I'm going to lose weight and pull-ups will be easier. That's a little bit of a nugget for you. So look, you state your goal for you. And that's why I'm writing this article. That's why I'm doing this podcast. I want you to be able to think about your goals and all the factors in mind and make the best decision for you, so you're not doing a cookie cutter program or wasting your time. State your goal and you decide what you should do. It's A, my primary goal is to be really good at kipping pull-ups because they're fun, challenging. I can get more conditioning out of them, and I want to compete in CrossFit. And notice I don't hate on this at all. I think it's awesome. Okay. Number 2, or B, I just want to be able to get stronger, lose body fat, build muscle, and get toned. I want to accomplish something that's very difficult to accomplish, a strict pull-up, which is much harder than a kipping pull-up. Kipping pull-up isn't nearly the accomplishment that a strict pull-up is. The irony here, in the vast majority of cases, is working on your strict pull-ups is the best way to get to both of these goals. The only real case for practicing kipping pull-ups is if they already have the prerequisite strength to be good at them. When you have the prerequisite strength to do a skill, acquiring that skill is, quite frankly, it's easy. It's certainly easy relative to trying to get the strength by practicing something you don't have the strength for. There's a reason why we have strength coaches and strength workouts and people go and practice their sports. It's like if I wanted to develop the strength to swing a baseball bat, do I just go and try to swing a baseball bat that I can't lift over and over and over and over again? Eventually, I might be able to swing that bat. What would be easier? 2 weeks of squatting and deadlifting and then going to practice and being able to swing a bat. The only real case for practicing the kipping pull-ups is if you're already strong. But if you're already strong, you might not be in this article. Now, if you couldn't tell, I really wanted to dig deep. I said this before, I said this a few times, on some of the fundamental principles involved in this, because I really believe that if you can understand these, you can make the best decisions for you to be able to get your strict pull-up. Now we're going to talk about a few examples of people, and you can start trying to apply some of the information to yourself or people you know. I want to illustrate how simple it is to be able to tell if a person can do a pull-up or not. These are intentionally genderless, ageless, heightless examples, not based on anyone in particular. Person A weighs 250 pounds and they deadlift 200. They cannot do a pull-up, period. You don't need to know anything else. Male, female, age, limb length, body fat percentage, it doesn't matter. They cannot do a pull-up, and they can practice pull-ups 7 days a week, and it will never, ever, ever happen. It will not happen. This person needs to do two things. They need to lose 50 pounds primarily and add 100 pounds on their deadlift. A body weight of 200 and a deadlift of 300 will put them in a position to be more successful. Obviously, specifics about this person, we could give better recommendations. But what this illustrates very clearly is there is a certain amount of body weight that you can't overcome. Not only can you not overcome it with strength training, you practically can't do that with strength training, because obviously if you weighed 250 and you got a 600-pound deadlift, you could do pull-ups. But it also illustrates that the person needs to get stronger and that they need to lose weight. No matter how much practicing they do, the pull-up will not happen. Why? Because if you're 50 pounds or 75 pounds overweight, there is no amount of practice that is going to acquire you the skill of a kipping pull-up. Next, person B, they weigh 200 pounds, but they deadlift 250. That person actually might be able to do a pull-up. It's hard to tell. A man probably could, a woman maybe not, but it's possible. So this person needs to continue getting stronger. A man, we probably say, needs to stay the same body weight and just continue adding weight to the deadlift, because a 200-pound man deadlifting 250 is not particularly impressive. It's not going to be very hard for a man to put on 100 or 150 pounds on his deadlift. Now, a woman in this case is 250, that weighs 200 and deadlifts 250. Adding another 150 pounds to your deadlift, not as practical. Possible, 3 to 5 years of training. And then there's still no guarantee that you'll be able to do a pull-up. So a female in this case would want to lose weight, keep the same deadlift. Person C, they weigh 150 pounds, but they deadlift 250. We have 3 examples now of the same 250-pound deadlift. This person, if a man, 100% can do a pull-up and has a very, very high likelihood of doing a pull-up if they're a female. We continue. Person with a 135-pound body weight and a 270-pound deadlift. A man could probably do 10 or more. A woman is getting multiple pull-ups with that kind of strength to body weight ratio. Now we'll go to a 250-pound person that deadlifts 500. That person can do a pull-up, period, and probably 5 and maybe 10. So the main takeaway here is simple. If you have good body fat or a good body composition and you have a strong deadlift, you can do pull-ups. The same cannot be said the other way around. If you are lean, can do pull-ups, but don't trade the deadlift, you won't be good at it. And the next conclusion flows beautifully. If you want to get them, then you need to get leaner, get a strong deadlift, and occasionally train pull-ups appropriate for your level of strength to body weight ratio. So now we can expand for a second here on the strength to body weight ratio. This is by far the most important factor determining your ability to do a strict pull-up, okay? Basically, if you could deadlift twice your body weight, guaranteed pull-ups are easy for you. You can even do them on the first day if you've never done one. Someone could come to the gym. If they could deadlift double their body weight, they've never tried a pull-up before, ever, they will do one. Without practicing them at all. Connor, how do I acquire a skill without having to practice it? It's because it's not a skill. If you have the prerequisite strength, you can do pull-ups, period. You don't need to practice them. But even if you have the prerequisite strength to do a kipping pull-up, you still have to practice kipping pull-ups to get good at them. Kipping pull-up is a skill. Strict pull-up is a strength. Take that same idea, put it with a handstand walk. You can't handstand walk just by being strong enough. You need to be strong enough to handstand walk, and then you need to practice handstand walking a lot. That's because obviously it's a harder skill to acquire. Now, if you're overweight, you need to lose weight and you need to get toward that 2-to-1 deadlift to body weight ratio. This means if you weigh 200, you got to deadlift 400. You go about this by attacking the low-hanging fruit. For example, if you're a 200-pound female with a 200-pound deadlift, what should you do? Well, you could try to get a 400-pound deadlift, but that's likely going to include gaining more weight, and then you'll need an even higher deadlift. Or you can work on losing 50 pounds, make small improvements in the deadlift, say maybe getting to 230 from 200, and doing 1 time a week strict pull-up training gives you a hell of a shot at strict pull-ups and pretty soon. And later, if you desire 20-plus kipping pull-ups with like 2 practice sessions. And if you're skinny, you need to get stronger and gain muscle and gain weight. Okay. Gaining weight in this case will be the only way to meaningfully change your strength to body weight ratio. For example, if you're 100 pounds and you deadlift 100, that's a 1-to-1 ratio. You'll be much more likely to do pull-ups if you weigh 115, you gained 15 pounds, but with the added muscle, you can now deadlift 200. Now you have a 2 to 1.15 body weight to strength ratio. So now here are some specific considerations for women. This is one of the other places where my advice differs for men and women. Women should bias losing weight in order to improve their strength to body weight ratio versus adding strength once they've acquired a decent amount of strength. Adding strength is still a primary component, but top end strength potential for women relative to men at their body weight is not the same. It's not nearly as high. This is a concept called neuromuscular efficiency and something we can expand on in another work. But a 200-pound man of the equivalent strength compared to a 200-pound woman, the 200-pound man can deadlift 3, 4, 5, 600 pounds. A woman's going to be 250, 300, 350. So all things the same, men have a greater potential for developing strength and should bias strength training when in doubt when it comes to getting a pull-up. Women that already have a decent level of strength need to bias losing weight. If you are 50 pounds overweight, if you're a 200-pound woman, getting a pull-up is never, ever going to happen, no matter how much you practice it, and even no matter how much you train it. You have to lose weight to get one. That's the only way, and a meaningful amount of weight. Take the example of the woman I listed above that is as strong or stronger than many men in many respects. She weighs 170, squats 3 sets of 5 at 210, and deadlifts 250, and almost did a strict pull-up. What's more practical for her? Improving her strength to body weight ratio significantly by becoming a 340-pound deadlifter or losing 10 to 20 pounds? Obviously, it's losing 10 to 20 pounds. The truth is she's so close to a pull-up, losing 5 to 10 pounds and keeping that same deadlift will result in a pull-up and likely more. Obviously, dropping body fat is the only way to go. It doesn't matter what program you do or how much you quote unquote practice or how much you even train effectively. If you're 50 pounds overweight, you are trying to do a 50-pound weighted pull-up every day. And you can't go from not being able to do a body weight pull-up to just all of a sudden you can do 50 pounds attached to your body. I've had people do that. They've been 200, lost 50 pounds, been 150 pounds, got their first pull-up, got really strong, and then did a 50-pound weighted pull-up. And they could barely do one and went, oh my gosh, that's what I used to weigh. Can't do that. It's not going to work. Conversely, if that exact same person was a man, like I said, say they weigh 170, squat 3 sets of 5 at 210, deadlift 250, they would most likely even be able to do a pull-up just with those numbers. But if they couldn't, we would recommend that person stay the same weight and shoot for that 340-pound deadlift, because adding 100 pounds to a deadlift for a man at that moment is reasonable, realistic, and actually would be a typical result with 3 to 6 months of regular training. Doing that for a woman may be a possible result, but not without significant dedication, at least 2 more years of consistent training, and potentially even adding muscle, making that person even heavier. So if you can't do a pull-up, here's what you have to do. Number 1, take the steps necessary to get as close to a 2-to-1 deadlift to body weight ratio as possible. And here are the steps to do that. Increase your strength, number 1. Decrease your body fat, number 2. And that's it. That's it. But like many things, the answer is too simple and the work too hard. Do not fall into that trap. When you get stuck on the basics, don't try to find other things to work on. Double and triple down on the basics. For most people, meaning over 70% of Americans, primarily what that means they need to do is lose weight while maintaining and or building some strength. For some people, it means gaining muscle and thus gaining weight to drastically improve said strength. So now we get into the nitty-gritty of how you should train. So training for your first pull-up. Okay, first note, the training for someone that is overweight or underweight is exactly the same. For training primarily, you need to do deadlifts. Take wherever you are and get much stronger. How much stronger you need to get obviously depends on your height, weight, current deadlift, etc. But rest assured, you need to get your deadlift up. There's no way around that. You can do this by following the novice linear progression. I link in the article to what that is. It's something we talk about at the gym. Maybe I'll do another podcast on it sometime. Or by just deadlifting a 5x5, a 3x5, or a 1x5 a week for the next 20 weeks and beyond, and add a little bit of weight each time. And yes, it is that simple. Remember, if your deadlift is good enough, you'll be able to do pull-ups without ever having to try to do a pull-up. If you weighed 300 pounds, but you could deadlift 700, pull-ups guaranteed. You can look up people on YouTube right now. Do it. Try to call me out. There's 400-pound people that deadlift 900 doing pull-ups. If you are strong enough, you can do a pull-up. Like I said, it's not necessarily practical, though, for women to just out-strength the excess weight they have. It's more practical for women to lose body fat. The lats, hands, forearms, and arms are worked in the deadlift in a way that produces significant strength and muscle gains that you need to do the pull-ups, okay? And you're getting other benefits. You can do them no matter what shape you start in. You can start with 15 pounds and you can go up in the perfect amount of weight every single time. They create a full body stress, helping you build muscle and burn fat. They're incrementally loadable, like I just said. This is a significant problem with bands, for example, because you might have 150 pounds of help from a band, and the next band you have 50 pounds of help. but there's nothing in there to progress. You can't go to a band with 145 pounds of help and then 140 and then 135 and then 130. But you can do that with deadlifting and they work the same muscles. Okay. Now we can talk a little bit about pull-up specific strength training. So I almost hate to put this in the article in the podcast because it's a waste of time for most people, but people latch onto this stuff and they just go, I'll just practice pull-ups 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then eventually in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, I'll get a pull-up and say I did it. And then I'll tell other people to do the same thing. Just because you did it that way or someone else did it that way doesn't mean that's a good way to do it. It is a tremendous waste of time. And I can tell you from firsthand, that's how I learned how to do everything. It's not the best way. That's how I learned how to do everything in the gym, was the hardest, most efficient way possible. But I don't teach people to do that because that wasn't the right way for me to do it. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't take what I did wrong and teach you how to do it correctly. It doesn't matter how many times per week you try to do pull-ups. If you weigh 600 pounds, it's never going to happen. Now, obviously that's an extreme, but the point stands. If you're a 200-pound person, you're not getting a pull-up unless you commit to a 400-pound deadlift. Reasonable for a man and still possible, but less so for a woman. So here's a few examples of some specific training you can do. Do ring rows, okay? You can do them 2 to 3 times a week. They're not very stressful. You can make them harder by putting yourself more horizontal to the floor, and you can eventually add weight. You can use bands. They're a great option, but they have significant limitations. For example, every band is different and helps each person differently depending on their height and weight. They wear differently. And here's the fundamental issue with bands. They make the easiest part of the movement even easier, which is the bottom, where there's the most tension in the band, while they make the hardest part of the movement, where people need help, even harder because the tension goes away from the band as you pull yourself up. Then we have dumbbell bent over rows and any other kind of row, a barbell row, a T-bar row. These all work the same muscles as the deadlift in very similar ways, but generally without the lower body component, which make them great, so they're less stressful. The lat machine is incredible. Now, I wish this was an option that could be applied to classes, but it's just not. The machines are extremely expensive, they're very heavy, and they're not practical for a class application. This allows them to precisely select the right weight and progressively overload the movement. On top of that, they use cables so the resistance is the same at the bottom and at the top and everywhere in between, which solves the issue with bands. You could do holds. So for example, you could jump to a position of the pull-up, hold yourself there as long as you can. You do negatives. You can jump into a position of a pull-up and lower yourself slowly. The applications of these exercises is very simple. Deadlift 1 time a week, and on the other day of the week, rotate a 5x5, 3x5, or 3 sets of max efforts. Occasionally a test, maybe like 5 sets of 1. Of these things and focus on progressively overloading them, doing a little more weight, more reps, or making them harder this time than last time, and do that repeatedly. But keeping in mind, if you have decided to remain 30 pounds overweight, you're wasting your time doing this stuff, okay? If you're 50 pounds overweight, you are wasting your time doing these things. And even if you know someone that did it the wrong way long enough and hard enough that they did it, i.e. me, for everything in life, not even just training, for everything in life, that you did it the exact wrong way and somehow managed to be successful at the end, doesn't mean you should or that we should teach people to do that. So an example program here, Monday, deadlift 5x5, and then do 2 sets of 12 dumbbell bent over row, add 5 to 10 pounds a week to the dead and 2 to 5 pounds to the rows each week. Thursday, 5 sets of 5 banded pull-up, and on that 5th rep of each set, perform a slow negative. Decrease the bands and increase the negative time each week. Now, there's an infinite number of combinations of training you can do, okay? It's extremely important to remember there is no silver bullet. There is no magical exercise. There is no magical program. There is only building muscle and losing fat and doing what will effectively and eventually result in pull-ups. Make sure to effectively overload. Add weight or remove resistance each week. Repeat that 12, 16, 20 weeks in a row. Unless you have exceptional dedication to your diet, sleep, hydration, and stress management, adding a 3rd or 4th workout is a complete waste of time. Why? Because then you're going to need to have even more dedication to your sleep, hydration, diet, and stress management. Okay. And it's probably a waste of time even if you do have that level of dedication. Of course, you could bench and press on Tuesday and Friday of the week. I'm not saying you would just only train 2 days a week, but those would be the days that you would focus on pull-ups. I'm just illustrating the way your pull-up strength would work, integrating it into your week. Now, the pull-up diet for the skinny person, okay? If you're already lean or skinny and you can't do a pull-up, then you need to gain muscle. If I say gain muscle, no one cries. If I say gain weight, everyone loses their minds. The truth is that you need to gain weight, and it is impossible to only gain muscle. Impossible. Get over it, okay? You will always be adding water, glycogen, bone density, tendon and ligament thickness, so you need to gain weight, and in gaining that weight, you will achieve a more muscular physique and the ability to do pull-ups, and ultimately a more favorable body weight to strength ratio. Follow a simple training plan like what I put above, what I just talked about, and use these as general rules for your nutrition. body weight in grams of protein per day, double body weight in grams of carbs per day, 50% of your body weight in grams of fats per day. Okay. Now it's going to depend. You can get much more specific, but that's good general rules. Okay. As long as you're training and progressively overloading, adding weight and removing resistance each time you train, you'll gain lots of muscle and probably very, very quickly be able to do pull-ups. Now, the pull-up diet in general for the rest of us, you need to eat a diet that helps you gain muscle and lose body fat. For most people, the emphasis here needs to be on losing body fat. This is not gym specific. This is not North Hollywood specific. This is United States of America specific. Over 70% of adults are overweight, and there's a good chance that you might fall into that category. I'm not going to do an entire treatment on nutrition for fat loss here, although my plan is maybe to write a separate article, do a separate podcast on that. But I'll cover some of the basics. Okay, you have to track your food faithfully. You cannot be successful without this. You don't have to track forever, but you have to track long enough in order to become very good at it. Almost no one does that, and almost no one gets the results that they would want. Not a coincidence. You have to make your own food. I've recently changed my mind on this. You have to make your own food. You have to. You have to learn how to cook. It's a basic life skill. You don't have to do it forever, but you need to be able to do it to reliably get results, okay? At least 80% of your food needs to be fresh and prepared by you. Nutrition labels are allowed to be off by 20%, and compound that with the fact that tracking apps are often off by an additional 20%, and human error accounts for 20%. Eating prepackaged foods is extremely difficult. But you know what you can be 100% confident about? That 8 ounces of chicken you made is actually 8 ounces of chicken. Eat your body weight in grams of protein per day, requirement to build muscle and maintain muscle mass. Eat in a caloric deficit. You have to burn more calories than you consume. A deficit of 500 calories per day will help you lose a pound per week. This is for another time, but you can calculate your total daily energy expenditure with a free calculator online, and then you eat 500 calories less than that consistently over time, you'll lose weight. Do everything I said above for as long as it takes, and rest assured, it will take much longer than you think. But if you can accept that and you can commit to following the process, you will eventually accomplish getting your coveted pull-up and likely doing a bunch of them. So in closing for today, almost everyone will be able to do a strict pull-up and shortly thereafter, many repetitions. But with the correct approach, which unavoidably includes eating, sleeping, hydrating, and stress management, for men, this will be easier and less meaningful, honestly. For women, this will be harder, but is a much more noble pursuit and a truly great accomplishment. Now, what I've attempted to write and talk about so far is the most thorough and thus hopefully the most helpful treatment on pull-ups that there is. I hope I've gotten close to this and I've answered almost all, not all of the questions you could have. If you have further questions or need help, please reach out to us. You can find me on Instagram, at Connor Green 3000, at Connor Green HQ, something like that, on Spark Fitness on Instagram, the website. You can hit the contact button in the article. I'm going to put this podcast in the article. Or you can email us directly at info@sparkfitness.com. As far as the article goes, the podcast, I obviously can't come back and just edit the podcast and add things in. I may do a part 2 or a 2.0 someday. But that article, I'm going to repeatedly come back to, include more photos, more videos, more program examples, demonstrations on how to do things correctly. I want to make this the best place on the planet, the most thorough place on the planet, potentially a mini book on how to get your first pull-up. So make sure you check back for that article occasionally. I think that's all I have for now. I don't know why I would think that. I don't have anyone else to talk to or ask. Like I said, if you need anything at all, please let me know. Comment, send me a message. I'm happy to chat with everybody. Again, Connor Green for the Connor Green podcast. Thank you if you've made it this far. I'll see you on the other side.